All right, guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today, sitting down with us, I have Coach Creguer. I hope I said that right. I've been thinking this whole time if I'm going to say it right. So, Coach, welcome. For anybody that doesn't know who you are, could you please introduce yourself to the loyal fans of the podcast, this lonely podcast that I have?
Well, good morning, loyal fans, and Coach Steve. I hope I pronounced that right. I got that right.
You got it.
Yeah. I'm Tom Creguer, coach up at Division II school in Michigan, at Northwood University. I'm a part-time guy now. My wife negotiated my contract so I get more hourly pay than ever before. But I've been a high school head coach in a variety of different sports, from football to track and powerlifting, and been an assistant in other sports like wrestling. And over the course of my years, I tell everybody I wasn't a Division III student athlete because I wasn't smart enough or talented enough. But I ended up as a Division I athlete as a co-captain and all conference player just because of determination and time frame. Um, and then I coached a Division II, so I have a gamut of experiences, and I try to add value wherever I am. And that led me to our conversation of what high and tight is. And I am a prior service Marine, so it is also my haircut, but it's more applicable to football right now. So that brought us to this.
Yeah, I live that short hair life. I put a head on today. It's grown out. It was falling out a little bit probably. I probably have some receding hairline going on. Might as well hide it up. Might as well. Gray's more
Ah,
showing up now, and it's no fun.
you gotta own that stuff. You are what you are, right? So I tell everybody I work out almost every day, and I say, and then if I don't, I tell my boys, I have three boys that are 12, 9, and 10, or 12, 10, and 9, and they're like, Dad, how come you don't move as fast as everybody else? I'm like, I'm just beating his body. My body's dying. They're like, no, it's not. I go, yes, it is. I go, you don't understand. 25 years ago, I can move pretty good. When you say it like that, they're like, 25 years, like that's what happens. Time stands still for no man.
Yeah, I joke. I just turned 30 back in November, and I know you're about to say you're about to say. Oh, that's young, and people have told me that, and but I don't feel like it. Like things are popping more, things are cracking and eking, and a part of me is like, I think it's the sports injuries coming back. Like, because back when we all played, you ignored that stuff. It was like, walk it off, rub some dirt on it, that type of thing, or like you're fine. Like we didn't go to the doctor. We wrapped it up and we went, and now I'm regretting that. Like my knees hurting a little bit, my back's starting to go out, and so I tell the now I've changed. Like when I first started coaching, I've been doing it 12 years. I started right when I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm coaching. Back then, it was like that. Now I'm more like, oh, you got something hurt. If it's a real hurt, I tell them to go ask the trainer because I'm like, don't end up like me where maybe one day I can't walk. I mean, I don't think it's that serious, but like my knees hurt, my back hurts, and
Well, here's a little thing to think about, Steve, and just pull your friends that you didn't play sports with, right? The people you went to high school that didn't get engaged in sports, didn't go to college and do that, and ask them about their aches and pains, because that'll give you a perspective that you don't even realize. Like everybody, their bodies like are collapsing, right? But we think it's because of sports. And the reality is all that sports do is give you a reason for that collapse. Because
yeah, that's
I've
true.
got I've got friends that didn't go to college. I mean, a ton of my friends never, a majority of my friends never went to college, never played sports, don't play now. And then they're like, "Oh, this hurts, that hurts," and I'm like, "Well, I can tell you exactly where my calf hurts. I know exactly where my shoulder hurts, because I'm still competing now. I mean, we play basketball, every day with a bunch of young kids, and young versus old, and I'm not the oldest guy in the court at 49, and we're whipping on these kids, and we come out of there sore. But I'm no different than the guy that my buddy who don't do anything. They're just as sore, if not worse, and they're complaining. So, there's a difference between injured and hurt. I'll give you that. But that pain and threshold, that's a beautiful thing to create. When you can push that threshold up there and push through and be persistent. I kind of wanted that in today's world with the whole, the pandemic element of, you know, could you have managed some of your sickness yourself, or you have to go to the hospital because the hospitals are it's supposed to be for sick people, and then you get there and you're like, they discharge 99% of the people, and you're like, well, how many of those 99% could you have, managed yourself, But that's a whole different side to it. That's a whole different discussion
Yeah,
right there.
yeah, because we didn't go to the doctor like my parents,
Yeah.
and I went to school. My dad told me, and maybe this is harsh to people, unless you're on your deathbed, like vomiting and you can't stop,
Mm,
you're going to school. And so people don't want to hear that. But like if I had the cold, but I could still get up and move, he's like, you're going. Take some
yeah.
medicine so you don't spread it or whatever and go.
Yeah.
And that's how it was. And I didn't afford to not go because if I was a starter, it could be taken away. Like if I didn't go
Yeah.
to practice, it was going to be taken away. Somebody was going to step in.
Yeah.
Oh, this guy played better. You weren't here, so he played better. And people don't think of it that way anymore. It's like my spot, like sports wise, like some kids are
Yeah.
like, I'm going to play. I can miss a day of school. And that's just how it is. Like it's not talking bad
Well,
about parents, but it's just different.
but that gets back to our off mic conversation about parents' expectations and parents' attention to detail of like what they're trying to create. You
Hmm.
want to create someone who that can push through and be persistent and persevere, or do you want to give somebody who's like, because our kids will call us, oh, I don't feel good. I'm like, all right, you're not going to fly football tonight. Are you not doing this? Well, I'm okay. I'm like, exactly, you are. Okay. Stop being that way, because if you come home, I'm going to put you to work or I'm going to put you to bed, period. Well, I don't want to. I go, then you're making a choice, aren't you? You're not as bad as you think you are. So,
Yeah. Because like we all did, there's probably times in even middle school or high school, I'm like, oh, I don't feel good. I just don't want to do school. But then it's like,
yeah.
but you have football practice, you have basketball practice. But it's like, oh, I can go to that. No, if the school's rule, you don't come to school, you don't go to practice.
Yeah.
And then you find out real quick, like, oh, I can push through 7 hours of school and go to practice and then just come and go to bed. Like I can figure it out. And it's funny, right when you do that, um, it's reinforcement in this whole world of like reinforcement. Like I talked to someone before, like people don't want to hear this. Sports is reinforcement of school. They go to school, they do get good grades. The reinforcement is they can go to practice, they can go do this. Uh, a reinforcement is, as sadly to say, video games. But like, if you don't let them play video games till they get this done, reinforcement is you get to do this. So they associate positivity with it instead of
Oh,
negative, and
well,
that's just kind of where we are.
and I'm shocked at how many parents will say to, like, will say to me, like, well, my kid won't get off the machine. And I'm going, I'll, I'll tell you right now, I don't know what it's like in your house because you can have your own standards, but, we created this thing in our home. It's like every 10 minutes you get 10 push ups. Now do we hold to it 100%? No, but the expectation is like, if you're going to be sedentary, you're also going to be mobile. You're going to be, creating some habits that are good. So you're going to do a workout, and our kids don't balk at it because they know I'll rip the thing out of the wall and throw it away for them, because it's my responsibility to create good, upstanding human beings.
Right.
I don't care if they can play video games, that's not my priority. I don't care if they can spend all their time. It's just like when we were going back in the day and we just go out and hang out with our friends.
Hmm.
Well, you got to do your work first before you go hang out with your friends. Like that, I don't know where that got lost in the whole generational change, but it's good to create a work ethic. It's good to have responsibility. It's good to accomplish those. These kids we've had, I think that the national averages on, depression and suicide for youth is at an all-time high. And I sit there going, well, that's kind of a link to the whole value and worth element, right? Like, because when you worked hard at practice, yeah, it was hard, but you had some value there. You felt like you were worth something because of all your pain and suffering you endured. Well, if we don't ever do that now, then it's easy for a kid to go like, well, I don't matter. No one would miss me if I wasn't here. Like, there's some real conversations there that we need to address. You know,
Um, I told you we jumped down a rabbit hole, and I apologize, but it's the suicide thing scares me to death because it's the social aspect. They're stuck in this room.
mm-hmm.
Now, not to be funny, this is no meaning to be funny, but like I play video games too, so people roll their eyes at me. But like I'm old now, like I'm an adult, so if I want to sit down and play Madden for a half hour, I'm going to sit down and do it. It's my escape for a half hour to sit there and do nothing, and people can roll their eyes, and that's fine. But I don't sit there and play video games hours upon hours like these kids. So there's a couple things we've been told: kids sit in front of this remote learning screen for 7 hours, and they go play video games for 4 hours. That's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're starting to see the kids are getting tired of video games now because they're stuck inside all day, and that's all they've done since March. So now I am hoping and seeing that you're seeing kids. I'm seeing more kids ride their bikes than ever before
Yeah.
than a couple years. I've been reading books again. One of them said find small positives. This pandemic is awful, but a small positive when we get to the other side of it, which we are, we're going to get to the other side of this. I think a positive might be maybe kids go outside more because they're like, remember when we had to play video games for 6 months straight and like we had to sit inside? Maybe they want to go outside now because when we were all kids, we didn't have all that. It was go ride your bike, go park and shoot hoops,
Yeah.
go hang out at your friend's house in the backyard, go play wiffle ball, go do whatever. So I'm
Mm.
kind of hoping that's what's going to happen when it's all said and done. Like they don't want to sit inside anymore. That's going to
Yeah.
go back to going outside. It's kind of what I hope.
Yeah. And our neighborhood sees the same thing. When we talked about off camera, how the pandemic didn't affect our family. It affected our friends because they couldn't spend time with our family. And we've never really like we'll respect everybody else's in terms of social distancing, but if you want to come to our house and engage with us because you need some friends and some loved ones, I mean, come on over. You know, um, I think I go to our church is virtual like everybody else's, and our pastor yesterday had a great conversation, great topic. He says we have so much emphasis placed on the pandemic and the concern and fear of it that we're missing the greater thing, which is where you're going to spend eternity. He said there's a bigger issue here, and if you have your eternity taken care of, then your short-term issues won't be as great. And I was like, that's 100% dead on. I hate the term now. Stay safe. I hate that. I really do, because we're not called in anything that we do in any sport to play safe, to play it safe. We're called to put it out there. You're one of the most sacrificing people on the field, Steve. You're a lineman. Coach Steve is like, you're teaching your kids to put it out there and to basically trade for your fellow teammate. Well, that's contradictory to this whole mindset of, well, just take care of yourself, be safe. And it's just not how we're designed. It's not why we're created. That whole fear element is not part of why we have purpose in life. And sport isn't about that. Sport's about being courageous and stepping out there and taking chances and making great plays, and failing and have somebody picking you back up. So I don't know. I wish we would just go more that courageous side, and then everybody go like, oh, I guess 99.6%, and then not to belittle the 0.4 that have lost their lives, but the reality is none of us know the last day. So when the people say, well, COVID's doing this, COVID's doing that, I'm going, there's a divine creator that's choosing how our bodies work. And doctors are instruments and tools, but they're not the deciding factor. Otherwise we'd live forever, because they could. Well, science is real. Science is this. I'm like, science has a maker. Let's acknowledge that. So.
Right. And us as coaches, what we preach, we hope to see in life. And right now we don't see it. We're not seeing. You just made up a good point. You made a lot of good points, but one was like when we coach, we hope that what we teach on not just X's and O's, like they're not going to remember power. Like you ran power,
Yeah.
like that's not going to matter. It's all the other stuff that we want to see translated into the classroom, and when they go get a job, and when they go to the army, when they whatever it is, it doesn't matter. And right now you're not seeing it, and that's why it kills us as coaches, because like it's a decline now. So people here, I know in Illinois, there were people in Illinois that were so happy that we weren't having sports. They were like, why would somebody risk their kids' lives and this, and that? And I got mad about it. I've had conversations. I go, well, Steve, these are the people that didn't play sports. These are the people that don't understand what it means to be a part of a team and work and then translate that into life. They don't understand it. So if they don't understand it now, they're never going to. So quit worrying about it. Let's worry about what we're doing. And I said, you got it. I'm so frustrated. And then you see people say, well, you want sports back because you're a coach and it's selfish. You're not thinking about this. And I'm like, I am thinking about this. It kills me that I'm seeing these kids fail school. It kills me to see kids, lose their friends because the depression's kicking in. It kills me to see that we can't help. It's not like I can just go to their house and say, let's talk about it. Like, here in Illinois, especially, no, that's a big no-no. Like you can't be going doing that because not get political. Our governor, whatever, kick rocks,
Yeah.
our governor, and So it kills us. And people think we're being selfish as coaches. I'm like, no, I'm an adult and I can figure out how to handle this. That 15-year-old kid, 16-year-old kid is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Like my brain was hopefully developed by the age of 25. I mean, I still think I'm immature, but like I can figure this out. Like I can have coping mechanisms like this podcast, for example. This is free therapy. This is a way
Yeah.
I can handle it. Talking to football coaches, I coach basketball, talking to them, like I can figure this out. That kid cannot. And we
Yeah.
can't fix it on the field right now. I don't know how to, it's hard to fix it. And Zoom can only go so far.
Yeah. But you're saying
And
that their support systems are non-existent right now, is what you're saying.
right, like
Because
it's
sports
not
means
in
a lot to
person.
them too.
Right. It's Zoom is great. That's great. But it only goes so far.
Mm-hmm.
It can only be like when I was OC in Charleston, we had a field house and it was 2 locker rooms, freshman, sophomore side varsity. I didn't work in the building. I was going to school and I worked third shift. So I'd get there like 2 o'clock and I'd watch film. I'd just go in the office by myself and watch film. I kept the door open because seniors would come in at 2:30. Open door policy. I said, when I'm there, when Coach Steve is there, that door is open. And we had this coach's couch. And I said, between 2:30 and 3:30, that's the therapy couch.
Mm-hmm.
Because what would happen? This kid would come in and knock on the open door. Coach Steve, can I talk to you? And there's the dog, everybody. She's awake. And we would just have these conversations. I'm like, I don't have that anymore. Like, I'm at a different school, but that's not there anymore. Like, I loved having the open door policy. So I always told myself, if I become a head coach one day, I will always have that. That door is open for a reason for you to come walking in.
Oh, I'm a firm believer that, we talked about, off camera about, our success at Northwood all those years. And, those games and those schemes were all decided because of those times between 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. when the kids are coming to your office and you got 10 million things to do. And they're like, hey, coach, got a minute? Absolutely, I do. And I cannot recall one kid that ever got turned away, but I can recall hundreds of conversations, and that's where it's just decided. They don't. It's an old adage one of the best things I ever learned in the teacher education program was they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because I was terrible at names when I was in college. Because you got athletics, you got work, you got all this, your school, and I didn't know hardly anybody's name. I know who they were, facial. My first classroom I stepped in, I had 135 kids in 6 sessions, five segments, and the day 2 I knew everybody's name, and they were looking at me. How do you know that, coach? I'm like, it's important. Like, you're important. If you're not important, then why are we even doing this?
Right.
Sports are much bigger. School is much bigger than just the allocation of time. It's all about relationships. That's why we do what we do. That's why we spend time and create new friendships. Meeting you for the first time, Coach Steve. It's like that's what it's all about. And my family gets mad at me because we'll go places and I tell them, I said, learn 3 things. Like, what do you mean learn 3 things? Learn 3 things about everybody you meet. It might just be their name. It might be where they're from. It might be what their interest is. But eventually, if you get really good at 3 things, you'll find out there's a connection somewhere, And then like when you and I can start talking, and then suddenly it's Coach Stone that's the connection point, or that you're in Naperville, and we start talking about Warren, Wheatonville is right close to you, and it's farm country, or Champaign, where your home is, where you grew up from, and that's my buddy was a coach there, Morning, son. I got my oldest son is out up. He just woke up, which is not normal. Yeah, because we're usually got his workout in by now. He's recovering from an ACL and a meniscus tear.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's been good for pandemic. Your small wins. He's a very active, athletic kid who can't play, and so now he's recovering, which is pretty darn good.
Yeah, there's a small positive. Not the injury, but like if you're going to recover, don't miss a lot. If you're recovering, like, there's nothing you can miss. That's good. Come back stronger. Like, I know people that had injuries from that was the only good thing. If we could have football in the spring, people that were going to miss had time. And you talked about, I'll quickly move on after this. I talked to Coach McPherson, who has the YouTube channel and all that stuff in Florida. I had him on the podcast last week. And it was funny because we're talking. And then finally I said, yeah, here in Naperville. And he goes, wait, Naperville? I said, yeah. He goes, I know people from Naperville. And he's in Florida. Yeah. He goes, I know Naperville. So, and then all of a sudden it was talking about Chicago, and then all of a sudden it was talking about this, and it's a small world when somebody you don't think knows where you live at or this, it just turns into that. Like,
Yeah.
it's a small world, or like, because I've talked to coaches, I don't think they know anything about the school I'm at. All of a sudden they might be like, oh, and even in Illinois, Glenn Bardise, the only reason why I even got talked to coach there, the head coach brought me in. We were talking. He goes, I'm just going to tell you right now, back in the 80s, I coached at Charleston High School where you coached. I just want you to know that.
That's awesome.
And that's kind of what stuck out to him was, oh, you coached at Charleston. So that's one of the big reasons why he brought me in, was he knew where I was coming from. Let's just put it this way. I ran my course there at Charleston. That's the nice way to put it. It was just time to go and move on. So he's kind of like, I know where you coach from. I understand what was happening. So let's bring you in. And because I wasn't going to coach anymore. It was that bad. I decided never to coach again.
Oh, wow.
But then up here in the suburbs, a lot of the fields are by the main roads. So you drive by and you start doing this. You're starting to itch. And you're like, well, there's football. There's sports. And he brought me in and showed me how to coach, brought it back. And so it was a blessing. So it was just like, just because I coached at this one school, he knew it, brought me in, said, you're going to coach again, brought me in. They called me the good luck charm because the school has 1999. I walked in 2018 and we went 10-1.
Nice.
And it wasn't because of me. I didn't do nothing, but they make fun of me. They're like, you're the good luck charm. And then I went to East Aurora. The school hadn't made the playoffs since 1982 or 88, I think. Now we went 4-5. We didn't make the playoffs, but that was the best record since 2000.
Wow.
So they said that too. They were like, yeah, you might be the good luck charm. And I was like, if I don't call plays, I think I'm okay. I think that's the issue was if I'm not the offensive coordinator, I think we're okay. And so that's why Addison brought me in too. He's like, I joked about that with him because I think it's a joke. And he goes, oh, you're definitely coming over now. Like now that you've brought it up, now you're here.
Nice.
And then COVID hit. So I was like, I'm not a good luck charm anymore. I switched. And then this happens. Like it's not a good thing.
Yeah. It's funny you had Coach Mack on. Him and I have done work together too. He's a great guy.
We talked a lot of non-football topics at the beginning because he was like, I X and O every day. We'll just talk about – I said, we can talk about any – that's why this podcast was originally the Sideline podcast. Oh, sorry.
No. My son's turning TV on. I'm like, it's going to be loud, and like you need to be aware of your certain situation. So sideline podcast meaning after a game?
Yeah, in February when I started this, I was like, I want to come up with a name that relates to coaches or something. So I wanted to call it like, I was like, where are we always at? And I was like, oh, I'll call it the Sidelines because we're on the sidelines. But like there was other podcasts out there with that name. So it had to be called the Sideline Podcast with Coach Steve. Like that had to be the full thing. And I kept it that way. And then in the summer and going into the fall, I realized I cornered myself to only be about football, which is great. I love football, but I coach basketball. I coach track. So if a guy comes on here and talks about track and speed development, people may not listen to it because it's not football because, oh, this theme of this podcast is football. Look at the background. It was a football field. Then I was like, there's more to football coaches than just football. So it was like one of my friends growing up, childhood friends, he worked for minor league baseball. He worked for the minor league Chicago Cubs team in South Bend, Indiana. So he does that, but he loves entertainment. He loves movies. He loves this. He's a real movie critic. And I'm like, well, I like movies. I would love for him to come on and talk movies. But Steve, that's not football. It doesn't go with what you're doing. So I made it the Coach Steve show. So I said it could be about anything now. Because talking to Coach Mack, he agreed. He was like, people don't know I love golf. I love music. I love Metallica. Like he wanted his intro on my podcast to be Metallica. And so we should start talking about things other than football. And I think it's good for people to know we're not just coaches. We're not just this. We are human beings. We have other things.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the podcast has turned to. Like I'll talk X and O's. I'll talk this. I'll talk philosophy all day. But I also want to find out like we're human beings. We have other things going on. You talked about your kids. You have your kids' lives. You have how you raise them. You have this. You have this. He had music and golf. That's kind of what it was. And wrestling. He loves WWE, I found out. And I'm like, you never would know that watching his YouTube channel.
You got to look at his picture, though, his bio picture. This is crazy hair, mullet. I mean, he looks like Randy Macho Man Savage. His college years were rough, you know. So, and I would have looked the same, except I had a head coach that, as I told you, I walked into the office. So everybody actually like, "Are you walk on?" I'm like, well, I was actually more a walk in. They didn't even want me, so I walked in the office, introduced myself head coach in July, and then 6 years later, I end up as one of his captains. But one of the first things he said to me after a week of practice was he came to me and goes, "Hey, are you that Creguer kid?" Hence we talked about the whole if you play well enough, they get to know your name.
Right.
So he had forgotten my conversation with him in July, me being in his office. But he goes, "Hey, been hearing some good things about you and watching you make some plays. Keep up the good work. Keep working hard. You've been doing a really good job." And he says, "And lose the hair." So I immediately cut my hair and so no more mullet. Otherwise, I'd look as bad as Coach Mack did.
Yeah, we weren't allowed to have long hair or facial hair in football at my
Mm.
high school, and so I think that's why I have a beard now because it was rebellion time. Like when you
Yeah.
left, you were like, "I'm going to grow." I didn't want to grow my hair out. I just kept it short. It's just what it is. But the beard, like every so often, I grow the beard out, and I was like, "This is defiant now." My
Wait.
head coach, Coach Denhart's his name. Every time if I ever talk to him, I'm like, "I have a beard now, just so you know, because you wouldn't let me have it."
Yeah, you're a grown man now. You can grow a beard. You can play Madden as much as you want. I mean,
Except now, I have to embrace this now. I think it was like 4 years ago, 3 years ago. No, I was at Charleston still. One of my track kids, my last year there, one of my track kids was like, "Coach Steve, what's that?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Is that a white hair coming in your beard?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And I went and looked, and there's white hairs coming in now. And I'm like, "No, no, no." So I shaved it off. I was like, "I can't have it." Shaved it off. And then at Lombard East, we went 9-0 in the regular season. So I'm very superstitious. So when we were 4-0, 5-0, I had a beard going. And I'm like, I
mm-hmm.
have to keep it now because superstition, football coaches were
Yeah,
very superstitious. So I've had it ever since. I'm like, well, there's white hair. Screw it. It's got to happen. It's part of life. I have receding hairline. I'm like, whatever. It's fine.
control what you can control.
Control you control. And then now, if people make fun of the white hairs, that's where I have a problem. I'm like, just ignore it. We all know they're there. You can't really
Yeah,
see them, but some that the kids will. It's always the kids. It's never adults. It's never friends. It's the kids to poke fun at me. Like, Coach Steve, is that a white hair or gray hair? I'm like, oh, you.
it's wisdom.
I like to
Fine,
tell them
yes.
that. Well, I
Yeah,
told them I'm going to name this after you. This is Tony. This is what you caused.
yeah,
To the kids, like, you caused this. You caused that.
yeah,
And me and my friend Joe, basketball causes hair to fall out for some reason. Football causes gray hairs.
yeah,
Is kind of what happened because he coaches
yeah.
football and basketball, and that happened to him.
Oh, yeah,
And because basketball, you're coaching nonstop during the game. You're nonstop coaching, nonstop yelling what to do. Football, you kind of call play, and then you're talking to people how to adjust. Basketball, it's nonstop. And I think that's why I like basketball too. I like going from football where you're on the sideline, you're coaching, but it's not as strategic all the time. It's not whatever. Then I go straight into basketball and I'm like playing defense with them on the sideline. I'm like, I have to do this and that. And then after that's over, then you're kind of like, I need a vacation. And I need to just sit back and
just
do
run.
all
Just
that.
go to Coach Track and just watch him run. Just be like, there he goes.
I did coach track, but it was
So,
the throwers. And then I had to help out with sprinters. And I was so naive to track. I kind of said, how hard is it to coach track? Hey, go out there and run. Oh, I learned very quickly there's way more to track than that. So I'm very blessed
oh
for it because
yeah,
I learned a lot. But at the time, I was like, Steve, go help the sprinters and the throwers. So I tell him to go throw, and I go to the sprinters. I'm like, well, how hard is this? Guys, sprint faster, run faster. Let's go run the bleachers.
there's no
Come to
more
realize,
science to that.
I
Yeah,
was like, because I'm thinking football. Like, how do we get faster? Well, you do fast practices, from this to that. And then so I go into track. I'm like, today we're going to run a ton of hundreds and 200s and 300s. Then we're going to do it again. Then we're going to do it again.
uh,
No, there's way more to it than just.
gotta have volume. Gotta have ODIs, UDIs. Oh yeah.
Well, like I was an
So
OC at 24, 25, and so I'm very naive. I don't know any better. And coaching track, I don't know any better. And we're just gonna run gassers all day, guys. That'll get you faster, like old school. Like I didn't know any
yeah,
better.
yeah.
Um,
It's funny you say that. Yeah, that's when I took over the high school program that when I came out of college. They had Hall of Fame coaches there, but then they were on rough times, and And then so they're like, well, how many sprints we running today? I'm like, what do you mean sprints? Like we don't run sprints. What do you mean you don't run sprints? I go, like our tempo will be faster than you've ever done before. You won't need to run sprints if you run our tempo. And then after the first couple of days of practice, they're like, okay, coach, we get it now. you know, like if you're getting, 3 plays a minute, then you're flying. And they're like, no, coach, we can't do that. I'm like, yep. And so you just trust the process, right? You just keep going. And so my second year, we first they had won like 3 games in 3 years, and then we went 5-4, and then second year we're at 5-4. But one of the games was this team's really good. They ended up as a top 4 in the state, and we had them. We should have beaten them. I say should have, right?
Mhm.
So we are third and goal at the 3-yard line with 20 seconds to go, and they're better than us, right? They were spread out, everything. My best player is my quarterback, and so they're spread out. We got time for one play really, and then if we throw it, we can get the field goal on, all that, right, and win it. I'm like, we're gonna win it. So we spread them out, empty the box, and I call quarterback trap, and our lineman falls down, and our quarterback is tackled on the 3. And so 20 seconds running clock, you're like, there's no way.
Mhm.
But every day at practice, you set this tempo and expectation up. So we would do 12-second field goal every day of practice and get the countdown every day of practice. And as soon as that kid hit the ground, we were howling field goal, and everybody's running on and running off. And so within 20 seconds, we ran a play, got set, got back to the line of scrimmage, and got a field goal off. And now we were wide right by a foot, but we had the opportunity and got it off and should have won the game. Got beat 13-12 or something like that. And afterwards, the previous head coach was a Hall of Famer. He goes, Tom, he goes, that was a great game. He goes, what you just did there, we could have never done in the 30 years I coached. And I said, well, that's just a testimony to those kids and the commitment to, the expectations you place for them, So I get it, like the idea of that. That's why when you said, I want to, I want to play Madden, I want to do this, I'm a grown man, I can do this. And I'm like, I always tell the kids, like, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Just because we can slow the pace down doesn't mean we should. Just because we can play Madden all day doesn't mean we should. So,
Yeah, that's why I give myself 30 minutes. If it's not every day, I haven't turned my Xbox on in like 3 months.
whoa,
Why? Because I've chosen to work on this podcast. I've chosen to
hey,
do this.
there you go.
I think it was the pandemic gave me an excuse to play it. But
Mm-hmm.
again, I thought we were only being this for like a month. I was like, this is my vacation. Like it happened right before spring break, and the next thing we know, it's December, and we're still here. And I'm like, oh well, you know, maybe me saying I'm a grown man, I can do this isn't the right way to put it. But a part of me was like, I am a grown man. Like nobody's gonna tell me.
I love it.
But yeah, I haven't turned it on in months because uh, I chose to work on this. I chose to
You're
read
talking about
books again.
priorities. Yeah, you're
Well,
talking
then
about priorities.
I chose to read books again. Like I got a bunch. I had a football overload before last year. I tried to research too much football and I got overdosed. I was like, I have too much going on in my brain. I need to stop. So all these coaching books I had, I just put them away. I was like, I'll come back to it later. Pandemic hit. I should have been reading them, but I didn't. We chose to watch Netflix. We chose to do this, go walk outside more, and then Xbox. And then I was like, you know what? I want to read more. So I've read these motivational books. I have a book on Kobe Bryant right now. He's my favorite player. I'm reading that.
Mm,
Learning like uh, all that stuff. So like I just read a book on Coach Wooden or Coach Wooden
mm-hmm.
and all that. So I chose to do that instead. So like it's funny, I have the Xbox there. It's there if I want it, but it's like I'm reading books and people are like, you're reading books. Do they
What
have
are those things?
pictures? Do they have pictures in
Yeah.
them? And I'm like, some do. Don't worry. There's some.
Mm.
Don't worry about it. But you played football in high school and this and that. You don't read books. I was like, you're right, but
Yeah.
I can't read fictional books. My imagination's not all there. It has to be real.
A value
It has,
position like that.
it has to be,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it has to be like Kobe Bryant. I'm reading that. It's real. I know what's going on. Um, what's another one? That Extreme Ownership book. I love it. I've read it 2 or 3 times.
Oh, Jocko, that's a good one.
I have another
Man,
one coming. There's another one that they wrote. I'm getting to come in. I love Coach
yeah.
Saban. Nick Saban's one of my favorite coaches. I have 4 or 5 books on him, and I read them. And there's things in there that you didn't know about, and you read that. Michael Jordan.
I want somebody to do a book on Nick Saban's the early years compared to the later years.
Oh, if there's because what's the one? The Making of a Coach. That's the one that talks about his whole life up until like so much time in Alabama. And when he
Oh, really?
won, yeah, and I can't remember if it was the first Alabama championship or the LSU one. They won. Confetti's coming down. He does
Mm,
his half-hour talk, and in there it says, "Coaches, meet me in the office in like 10 minutes." So they go in there. They're getting their adult beverages out because they just won the championship. They want to go do this. He hands them all folders and says, "You're going here. You're going here. You have to go talk to so and so." And they go, "Coach, we just won the championship. What are you doing?" He goes, "We lost 3 weeks of recruiting or whatever because we had to play the national championship. We're way behind. We have to get to work." And they're like, "He didn't smile. He didn't do
yeah.
this." And we were out recruiting. That night, the next day, they were recruiting and they were game planning. He goes, "We have to play this team first in August or September. Like we have to get ready."
Hmm.
And he was just boom, boom, boom. And then compared to now, he's laughing more. He's smiling. Like when they won the SEC championship, like he was smiling up there. Like he was this, he's that. He's dancing with the team in the locker room. Like that
Yeah.
wasn't in this book from his LSU
No.
days.
It's funny you mentioned LSU because I have a friend that was on staff at LSU, and when he got when he got hired, he said you're going to work 50 out of 52 Saturdays, and he's like, what? So he literally worked 50 weeks straight, and he goes, and the story is about him chewing people out. He said I wasn't even there a week, and he made this trainer girl cry because she did something wrong during a team period.
That
He's
Coach
like,
Saban that did that.
yeah, yeah. He's like, this is real. Like, like his intents and his attention to detail and his desire for vision, and which we all know that the part that I struggle with is like, okay, is that the reason he's good, or is the reason he's good is because he has a very systematic approach to how he attacks every single thing of the football development. Getting on a trainer does not make you win games, And so you see these guys who get obsessive, and it's like, don't take everything from this. Take the right things from it, because he doesn't do it perfectly. Otherwise, he'd still be in the NFL.
Well, he calls it the process. If anything goes outside the process, he flips out.
Yeah,
So that's actually a good point of if the trainer doesn't do what he thinks the process should be done, he's going to flip. And it's not about winning games; it's about the process. And he'll tell you if they lose a national championship, but he goes, if we stuck to our process and we still lost the game, then we adjust, tweak the process. Like what did not go right, and we just tweak it. That's the way he thinks.
yeah.
Um, but like there was a video just recently, it showed him at practice, or like I think it might have been last year because they weren't in masks, but it might have been last year. He's walking around and he goes, "Someone gave me the wrong size shoes. My feet are killing me. Whoever gave me these shoes are about to get fired because this, and this." Now, I think he was kind of joking, but he says it so seriously. And then someone gives him a Gatorade. He goes, "I asked for a water. What kind of thing are we running here?" And this is that. And he's all over the place. And then he had hip surgery, so he's going to his wide receivers. He goes, "I just got this hip replacement, so I'm ready to go. If you want to go one-on-one, we'll go." And he like stands in front of him and he's like ready to go. I'm like, he's fiery. Like he's
Yeah.
69 years old or whatever, and he's fiery. He's all go all the time.
Well, now you're talking about some of the guys like Frank Solich. That's who I think of when you start about fiery. That guy still, he's 70 and he runs with his team, works out with his team. Like that's and it gets back to that that process. I tell the kids, I go, that the confidence that a guy like that has, confidence comes from experience. Experience comes from repetition. Repetition comes from habit, and habit comes from character, and character comes from you. Like if you just trust that, these people that are big talkers, I'm like that's not. You don't get confidence from talking about stuff. You get confidence from experiencing stuff and going through it. And I said that's it. We'll break it down for kids and get them to understand. Then they'll truly embrace that process. And when Coach Saban said the other day, he said when your best players on your team are your best people on your team. That's the part I read that as those people get it. Like they're the best people because they get the process. They get that they should be treating their teammates properly. They get that they should be on time for meetings. They should all those things, and they can be successful. And not to mention, they're probably the most elite athletes in the world. So that helps.
Right. Someone told me they're thinking about reducing the scholarship numbers to try to make it even so Alabama doesn't get all the recruits. And I'm like, oh, don't be changing the game field because. But this is what I told them. Just because he gets those recruits doesn't mean they play the first year. You see some of them don't come in until their third year.
Well, but that's the mindset of this world right now. Like that's this whole, like we were talking about, like the leadership in the pandemic and all this, like protecting and trying to provide for everybody equality. That's not how we're successful in this world. You don't say just because they're better than you that we gotta adapt the situation so that way, I can be as good as them. That's wrong.
Yeah.
The leadership that we have nowadays wouldn't, we talk about this, the leadership we have nowadays isn't run like a football team, isn't run like a coach, isn't run. And as a result, this leadership never would have put people in harm's way to go overseas and fight the elements of World War I and World War II. Never would have done that. They'd be like, well, we can talk it out. No, at some point you have to be able to put yourself in harm's way and be willing to sacrifice for what you believe in. Otherwise we wouldn't be the America we are.
Yeah, during this pandemic, and I'll criticize our governor more because I don't care. I said if we had a football coach in charge or any type of basketball or something like that, we would have been golden. We would have been good to go, I think.
Without a doubt.
They may not have been good with politics. You hire people to help you with that side of it, but the leadership part of leading a state, they would have been perfect for it.
Oh, I feel so bad, being in Michigan, our governor is so, outside of her skill set and over her head. She got, her campaign was, let's fix the damn roads. And then she gets in like the office on that platform. And now it's like, okay, so you're going to fix the roads, which you haven't done, but you can't even begin to comprehend how to handle this. And so you're doing all these things. You think you're saving lives when the reality is you're crushing your economy and you're killing your families. You don't even see that part, but yeah.
Well, and then the big thing is leadership, and the big thing is working with others. Our governor does not listen to anybody other than what he wants to listen to. Yeah. So if someone comes to him and says, not to argue with him, just to say, hey, let's talk this out. Let's look at this. Let's look at that. He won't listen. And I said, a football coach would not have done that. They would have said, okay, let's go in the office and talk about it and let's get through it. So you would have had leadership. You would have had working together. You would have had team. Not in politics. That's not how it works. It's my way or your. That's the big thing I hate about politics. You're wrong and I'm right. There's no in between.
Don't even get me on politics. That's like 90% of the problem in our world right now. You got somebody who's now our president and never, been a public servant all his life, right? Come up from real, basic means is what they say. Never made over $200,000 a year in income, but yet he's worth over $2 billion. I mean, I'm a simple math guy. How does that work?
Well, that's so a lot of these politicians are like that. Like your pay should only be like what 120,000, but then you look at it like, well, then how did you make $1 million? How did you make $5 million? Like, it's every politician everywhere. I'm like, how did this? Somewhere between the 1800s and now, they got too much power and too much money, and we allowed it to happen somehow.
Oh. Yeah, the government was. I mean, our forefathers, as many bad things we have in our country, in terms of foundational elements and issues with our history, we've also got the wisdom that said back then that there's big issues, and this government is set up for the people, not by the people for the people, not so that so we can serve the government. And now we're switching it, and this is the problem. We're creating. We want our people to serve the government, and that's not the vision of freedom.
They work for us.
Supposed to.
We voted them in. They're supposed to work for us.
Supposed to.
And somewhere along the way, last thing about politics, and then I can just get you off of here. I know you got things to do. The government was supposed to have all this power to close things. People talk about it all the time. Like the government was not supposed to have the power to say you can't open up your small business. You can't do this. But now that they have it, now that it's happened, it's gonna be here. If they don't like, see, here's what I fear, especially in Illinois. If
Hmm.
they don't like something, they're gonna tell you to close it. If they don't
Yeah.
like it, they're gonna close it, and that's my greatest fear right now.
Well, that's the idea that you do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. So if you keep doing this long enough, you're never going to get a different result. And that kind of, when you talk about coaching and growth and change and improvement, coaches are driven by improvement. Our society is not driven by improvement. Our society is driven by status quo. Like, let's get
Yeah.
everybody to just have equality, and just that's not what entrepreneurialism is. That's not what freedom is. It's about being able to take it to the level you want to. That's how come we're in this conversation, because I created High and Tight, which is a football that helps teams change the way they do ball security. Because for literally decades, we've always just said high and tight, and we've always just said, this is how you train, and so we never actually did anything differently until now. So we got to have change.
Well, Coach Stone was like, "Hey, he's a good guy. You should get him on the podcast." And I was like, "Okay." And then next thing I know, he's giving me a list of people like, "This is a good guy. This is a good guy. This is a good guy." And you know, uh, not even just say that you create high and tight. He didn't even say that. He was like, "He's a good guy. Just get him on there." Like, it wasn't even. It was just, you know what I mean? And like, and Coach Max said the same thing. He was like, "I don't know if you would have had me on if it wasn't for my YouTube channel." And I said, "Well, yes and no. Yes, because now I know who you are, but
Mm-hmm.
it was social media gave me the opportunity to just to send him a message and say, let's
Yeah.
if you want to be on the podcast." Because I didn't even ask X's and O's. I was like, you do that all the time. I just want to have a conversation. And I think he loved it. And he was like, I said, yeah, you're not just the YouTube guy, you're Coach McPherson, you're Coach Mac. Let's let you know,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Like, so, we have these ways of people to find out about us, but then it's like, what do you do with it? Now, if I brought you on and all we did was high and tight and then I was done, I think that'd be disrespectful, like there's more to you than just that. It's like we just had this long 47-minute conversation. And that's what I love. Like, I'm very easygoing and this and that. I want to respect people the way I can until they give me a reason not to. So I try to give respect right off the bat.
Well,
And maybe that's wrong of me, but that's just the way it is. That's that small town living. Like, everybody, you have to respect
yep.
them, wave. When you drive by people and you wave. Chicago,
Yep.
you don't do that. You don't wave at people when you drive by. It's like, they think you're coming after them.
My wife gets mad at me because I wave at police officers. She's like, don't do that. I'm like, where I am.
No, it's
So,
not how you are.
oh, now she's hot. Now she's heckling me. So what you're talking about, Steve, is that, we're solutions-based people, and we're always trying to make the world better. So I appreciate you bringing me on and talking, and in your circle of influence, all your coaches that you have. Ironically enough, in today's pandemic area, I actually partnered with a company too called Blast Fundraising, which helps teams and programs fundraise in a COVID-friendly element, because I had so many coaches who loved the product and couldn't afford it because they didn't do their fundraiser because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So if your membership has any issues with, fundraising issues, and they've never seen this product created out in California about 6 years ago, and it's moving east. I was the second guy east of the Mississippi that got on board because I saw the platform, and it resonated with me, with all the things that we have to overcome, just in team communication, team management, and fundraising, and all this other stuff. It's all one stop, and it's all free. So you and I should talk afterwards to get off for your basketball team.
Yeah. So before I kick you off, people are going to ask what high and tight is. So you just said it. We always preach high and tight, but then define. But like you're right, defined high and tight. So how did you come up with this football that essentially beeps when it's not high and tight?
Oh, it's actually the other way around.
Other way around?
It beeps when it is high and tight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because that's the part
I'm an idiot, so I don't know.
No. And from an offensive line standpoint, so there was a college that didn't have a running backs coach, and the offensive line guy is the one that bought the football for him, because he's like, I want to watch my guys. I want to watch their footwork. I want to hear that the guy behind him has the ball tight to their body. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to find out too late either. So you can hear us getting better at ball security is kind of what we say, because all the other times you don't know you're getting better at ball security because you just do the drills you've always done. You spend your 5 minutes on, ball security drills and the circuit, and then suddenly in the middle of the game, you find out that you're averaging 1.5 fumbles a game, and you're like, well, why in the heck are we turning the ball over? Well, repetition becomes habit becomes character, and character what you see in the game. And so we leverage an opportunity to bring in a different sensory, so that way you could tell if you're actually working at it. So in our practice at Northwood, the balls are beeping at all times. When guys are on the sideline, they got a ball in their hand, creating good muscle memory. Split finger, wrist and elbow tight to the body, and the ball measures how much pressure you have on it and how you have it pressured on there. So if a guy has a high and tight ball in his hand and he's not getting the beep, it creates an awareness like, okay, what am I doing wrong? And so now he's teaching himself, okay, I got to change something, right? Whether it's my wrist that's too high, or I got a finger on the tip instead of splitting it, all these different things. Or I'm on the seams of a ball, and so now I need to finish with the off arm to lock it in. It's teaching at a whole different level, and creating awareness. And our head coach loves it because he can sit there and go, now I know we're working on a thing that usually defines the outcome of our game. Like the team that turns the ball over usually gets beat, right? The team that wins the turnover battle has like an 85% chance of winning the game. And so if we can eliminate fumbles, and what's that value position, right? If I tell the coaches like, well, we've always done it this way, I'm like, that's great. If you could spend $100 or $150 and eliminate one fumble that costs you one game, would you do that? Oh, absolutely. I'd spend $1,000. Well, then you just need to recreate the way, like there's a tool out there for now that will actually do that. Our running backs are at 506 carries without a ball on the ground now. And last year we only lost 2 fumbles by our wide receivers, both of them reaching for first downs and reaching for touchdowns. So they have habits. They want to be successful for their team. Not faulting them, but that's a jeopardy that happens, right? As soon as you stick that ball away from the ball's gone. And so we just got to create better habits for our kids and be able to know it with multisensory training. Highandtight.com, all spelled out, no spaces.
Yeah, what a simple concept to come up with that. Like, I'm amazed when you came up with that and other people come up with things. I'm like, how simple was that to come up with? Like, nobody thought of that, but it was pretty simple, pretty good idea. Like, then I go, I wish I thought of that.
Yeah, Coach Singletary, you're a Bears guy. I'm sure be living there. Coach Singletary was all about that when he brought me down there to work with his team when he was at the AAF. And he's like, this is something I would think of. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure I'm not the first person that thought of this, truly. But as a coach, we don't have the time. Like you're talking about choosing your time, right? So as a coach, I don't have the time during the middle of the season to do something like this. So it actually going to high school and then experiencing it allowed me the time to then allocate resources and have conversations, really is what I did, on how do you measure this and how do you do this. And over the course of a couple of years and some investment, you get to this solution. And so now it's just a matter of educating people, because once they use it, they're like, oh, I get this. This is amazing. But they don't realize it's there because they only know what they know.
Right.
I call it generational coaching. You're only coaching what you've been taught. And so when someone says, well, how do you hold a football? And then a guy puts a finger on a tip, he's like, well, that's what I was coached. I'm like, well, there's science behind this. You don't want to have a finger on a tip. You want to have split fingers, so it's equal distribution of pressure, because the reason you fumbled the ball is because someone placed more pressure on the ball than you had on it. And so now you need to think differently in terms of how you apply pressure to the football. And we use an acronym called TEAM, which is technique, exposure, and awareness of movement, because all those grade your way to be successful and carry the football each and every time. What was it? Was it your technique that got broke down? Was it the exposure of the ball, that you had your hand turned and so the ball was exposed? Or was it the movement? The ball's away from your body, and then therefore it's in jeopardy because you can now get someone else to hit the ball and punch it out. But no one's ever, we all agree that ball security is important, but we never actually quantified it and had a way to measure it and create habits that are successful until now.
And that's kind of where you said, this is the way we've always done it. This is how we're going to do it. And I sort of was like that when I first got into coaching, but I was 18, 19, 20 years old. So you just know what you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go coach at a play. When I was coaching at the next school I was at, I was the only one on staff not born and raised there. So Out of 10 coaches, I was the only one. So what do you hear all the time? Well, this is how we did it in 1985 or 1998 or 2012 or whatever it was. And I was the guy that was like, well, I'm going to branch out. So I go talk to other coaches. I go do this and go do that. And then I quickly realized there's more to football than this bubble you guys have put yourselves in. And so it's like, go learn. It's not always, if you stop learning, then you should stop coaching, in my
Truly.
opinion. So you just told me something like, when I think of a high tide football, I just think get your arm around and your hand on it. But you just said, like, if you have two fingers here or this here, there's a way to hold it. There's a way to do this. I didn't think of that. I just think, I'm an O-lineman, so I don't think about it. But when I help coach other positions as an OC, I'm thinking, you got to keep it here. You got to hold on to it like you got bread and you're taking it to grandma, like, or something. Like, there's ways to adapt and this and that. And coaches don't do that because we're creatures of habit. It's like, this is the way we do it. And we're not going to change.
Yeah. I've been successful, so therefore, you know, I'm going to continue to do what I do. And but I think the best ones are the ones like, you know, if you look at Coach Saban, we talked about him a little bit, like what he's coaching X and O's wise from 40 years ago until now is totally different, right? The schemes he teaches, everything, totally different. Now he might apply it to this process, but he's adapted. You know, I always think of that with my one of the most amazing examples of that is my son's surgeon out of U of M. He's a pediatric orthopedic surgeon, and you know, and this new technique that they did for his ACL. I told my neighbor who was a PT, and he's like, they used a quadricep graft, and I'm like, yeah. He goes, that's cutting edge. This guy must be like 40 some years old. I'm picturing this jet setting guy, and I go, well, no, he's actually like 75. And so when he first started doing knee surgeries, they were doing casts, they were using cadet, you know, I mean, it's unbelievable how different until now. Now it's scope, and now it's, you know, he was walking on it within days. You know, for that guy to change from his 20s to his 70s, that's amazing to me. You know, if we continue to change and improve like that, you know, then we'll be the best version of us when we leave here. And ultimately, that's what we want to do.
Right. And like I said, that's why I did football overdose. I was finding everything I could. And then I overdosed a little bit. And I was like, my brain hurts. I'm going to stop. But then now that everything's kind of come back down to earth, I'm like, oh, look all I learned. There's more ways to do this. And you're adding to your toolbox, or it's in your back pocket of like, and then one last thing I'll say, like, run game coordinator, the coach is like, we're going to do ISO. You got to install ISO. I've never really coached ISO. I've done inside zone and all that stuff. But I've researched ISO throughout the years, and I have it written down. I've talked to coaches. So it's in my back pocket to where I've adapted to where I can go do this now. Because it's in my back pocket. I've researched. I've talked to people. I've figured out how to do it. That may be a bad example, but in my mind, I'm like, that's the recent thing that I've done where I'm like, I've changed. I've adapted. It wasn't like, go coach this. And I'm like, well, that's not how you're supposed to do it, or that's not how I've done it, or, you know, there's ways to figure it out. Yeah,
that box and that bubble is scary.
Yeah.
That mindset will keep us going back into when, you know, we didn't have racial equality, you know, and all these different things. So,
well,
Coach Steve, I appreciate you. Appreciate our time.
Guys, go to High and Tight and get that football. I was looking at it when Coach Stone told me to get you on. He told me to get you on weeks ago, but I've been all over the place. And then he calls me, have you got him on yet? I'm like, God dang it, I need to call him or whatever. And so go look at it. I've been looking at it. It looks really cool. I've talked to my head coach about it and be like, we need to get this. I'll go talk to the running back coach. I'll be like, you need to get this, or it's really cool. So anybody listening, go check it out. Coach, I appreciate your time this morning away from your family, but I appreciate it.
Thank you. You as well.
Yep. I'll see you guys next time.